Hello and welcome to the Nature Place podcast.
All I really need is a song in my heart, food in my belly, and love in my family. All I really need is a song in my heart, love in my family. Let's do that.
The Nature Place pod is planted by the Nature Place Day Camp in Chestnut Ridge, New York. On this podcast, we'll discuss many things, and just like the Nature Place, all of it will be connected to nature.
All I really need is a song in my heart, love in my family.
Hello, all, and welcome back to the Nature Place podcast. Today, we are joined by the legendary trip leader. Hello, Roger. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. So, Roger, tell us where you are right now, because we didn't see you this past summer at the Nature Place. Kind of give us a little bit of a life update.
Well, we relocated to the Asheville area. I live in Weaverville, and I'm right here in the Blue Ridge Mountains. So I'm at 2,000 feet in elevation, but within a half mile of a half an hour of my house, I could be on the top of Mount Mitchell, which is the highest mountain east of the Mississippi. So lots of hiking out here, lots of nature. Weather is kind of crazy. But other than that, here also because my kids are in the area. My son is in Burnsville and my daughter's in West Asheville.
So, Roger, you didn't necessarily have a classic background in hiking. You didn't come from a huge, hiking background when you discovered hiking. Tell us how you transformed into the amazing hike leader that you are.
All my life, I've loved nature. And when I was a young kid in my, elementary school years, we lived about 4 houses away from the woods, and I would, that was where I would go to with my friends and to escape and to explore. But then, a world in commercial finance and law and things like that kind of got me out of the nature. And I was bicycling, I was going to a health club, I was traveling and doing stuff like that. But I really kind of had lost touch with nature a little bit. I went on a vacation to Scottsdale, Arizona, and there was this mountain called Camelback Mountain, and it was about 1.5 miles, 2 miles from the hotel we were in. And we climbed it one day from one side with my son, and it was just such an amazing experience. And the way he kind of bonded with that, he was about 11 years old at the time. And then we came back the next day or the following day with my wife and my daughter, and we climbed it from the other side. And it just kind of dawned on me, it grokked, as they say, that if I had a mountain like this somewhere near my home, then I would climb it 2 or 3 times a week. And that would be my exercise. And I would give up my gym membership, and I would just feel so healthy and so fulfilled. Well, a few years later, I'm driving down the Palisades Parkway, and I go under that overpass. That's the pedestrian bridge that goes from Alpine to the Palisades Cliffs. And I said to myself, I remember from when I was in high school, I graduated from Tenafly High, that there were trails back there and that it was pretty cool to go over to the cliffs. So I went back the next day with my son, and we walked over the pedestrian bridge. We parked on 9W. And I started to go down the cliffs on this trail called the Forest View Trail. I didn't know it at the time. I didn't even know what a trail was. I mean, there were little paint splotches on the trees, but I just assumed that was, I just had no idea about the whole blazing system or anything like that. And I made it down about halfway, and I said to my son, son, you go without me, because I'm afraid if I go down much further, maybe I'm not going to be able to walk up. I mean, I wasn't in terrible shape, but I wasn't in great shape either. Well, the experience was so rewarding that I went back time and time again. I went down to the short trail. I learned that there was a trail system that was called the Long Path. And I learned that there were paths along the top of the cliffs, and there were paths along the bottom of the Hudson River, the short trail. And I started exploring the long path, which I learned went from from Manhattan all the way to Albany. And so I would do section hikes, and I also, so I just kept going to doing different places and discovering parks closer to me. There's Tacamac Park, which is not too far from me, and of course there was all the trails over by the Palisades. And after a year or so of this, I reached Harriman, and I was a little annoyed because the long path was a little bit harder to access. There weren't so many roads crossing it. And then so I was talking to somebody. I said, so if I take this path, where's the next road? And he said, well, you're in Harriman. He said, why don't you just go, explore Harriman? And I said, all right. So I drove to one of the campgrounds, and I bought a set of maps. And, and I started looking at this whole map, this whole trail system in Harriman. I'm like, this is pretty interesting. And then I bought a book called Circuit Hikes in Harriman. And that's what taught me about, different ways to hike, different things that are considered, mileage, elevation gain, strenuousness, types of terrain, and all this other stuff. And I decided to redline Harriman using this book. And so I did all the trails in this book, Circuit Hikes in Harriman, which is by Don Weiss, who's an amazing hike leader and amazing contributor at the New York, New Jersey Trail Conference. And then I went and hiked the little segments that weren't covered by the book. And so I was hooked, and I would hike, a few times a week. I gave up my health club. I gave up bicycling, and I didn't give it up completely, but it just didn't hold the interest for me that hiking did.
And how many years ago was that when you made this discovery?
That was over 10 years ago.
Okay. So, relatively short connection to Harriman State Park, all things considered, that, Harriman State Park has been around for a long, long time. But you certainly, took the trail by the horns, so to say, and you became, a relative expert and activist for Harriman, and also a huge volunteer. So tell us how you got involved with New Jersey New York Trail Conference, and how you got so connected to the park.
Okay, so I was also at a stage in my life where I had discovered mindfulness, and I had given up some of my, I'd given up my corporate job and decided that I was never going to work in a field where I wasn't going to have some type of fulfillment. And I worked for a magazine called Natural Awakenings. I started that position, which is a Healthy Life, Healthy Planet publication, and I, was in sales and marketing for them, but my dream was to figure out how to monetize my love of hiking. And so I became, more interested in that. And I went to, I wanted to basically somehow get paid to hike. I was like,
that's the dream for all of us, right?
Exactly. Like if you could, so but I also wanted to get paid to explore nature and to contribute to and give back to the trail system. There's a whole volunteer network out there that there's so many people giving back that it's really not that easy to get a job, getting paid to hike, or even getting paid to help with the trails. But I didn't care. I just kept going forward. I wound up becoming a volunteer, and I managed this HTS trail, which was a very challenging trail. And I just fell in love with not just hiking, but with maintaining the trails and making sure that they were navigable, and cleaning them up when there would be blowdowns and things like that. Not the major stuff. They use chainsaws for that. So I never became a sawyer, as they say. And about 6 months after I started working as a trail maintainer, the guy who hired me quit. He said he'd been trying to do that for a while, and he felt that it just was time because they weren't really finding a replacement for him. And he said, you really took to this pretty quickly. And I said, well, yeah. I said, but, it's just 6 months. And he said, and, you're really I noticed you're very big on social media and you're a connector and whatnot. He said, this could be something that's very interesting to you. And so next thing you know, I became the supervisor for 60 miles of trails in Harriman. And it was just a wonderful experience. I had 25 maintainers that reported to me. I had to hike all 60 trails at least once, all 60 miles of trails at least once a year. And I became very involved with, how the trails worked and making sure that they were, navigable in the sense that like the blazes reflected which way the trails would go.
You know, when I moved to this area, I knew of Harriman State Park. I also knew that this area was mostly made up of parklands, Rockland County, and Harriman was kind of like the top of the list. But I didn't really understand the significance of what is there until getting to know Ed better and getting to know you, and it's absolutely incredible that this expansive state park with amazing mountains to climb and wonderful trails that all connect with each other and beautiful mountain lakes, is 45 minutes from the epicenter of the biggest population in America. And you wouldn't know it once you're in Harriman State Park. And also that the park, before it was actually a park, was clear cut and significantly mined for natural resources and was helped build New York City to what it is now. And now it's this beautiful jewel of nature, and how nature can come back after being ravaged the way it was is just, it offers a lot of hope for, all the environmental challenges that we are seeing right now.
Just thinking about that makes me tingly because, the story of Harriman is amazing. Basically, it started with Bear Mountain. They were going to build a prison, and and I'm not going to go into the whole details of the story. It's pretty well known, and you can find it on the back of any of the trail maps. But the Harriman family was very active in making sure that the state that they didn't open a prison in Bear Mountain, and instead they started a park there, and that extended into Harriman, and all the land that had been used for farming and for grazing cattle. And another thing that's amazing about Harriman is there was a lot of mining that was going on. And the iron mines, what's left of them are wonderful, to the extent that you can explore. You can't really go down into the mines anymore, but there are a few places where you can enter them.
I remember the day, sorry to interrupt, but I remember the day where you taught me about rusty rocks.
Yeah, like the rusty rocks are iron ore.
Yeah,
they're caked with iron ore, and so much of it around. So there's just so much history in Harriman. There are something like 100 different Native American relics and I mean sites that are protected. We don't tell you where they are because we don't want people to loot them or anything like that. But there's still the remaining Native American sites. There's the Claudia Smith's Den, which we've gone to, which has become
one of my favorite places in the park.
Hiking destination. In Harriman, you can basically, be by cascading brooks, be by lakes, be in rock formations. The actual physicality of the trails, the terrain is just so variable. And the other thing that's amazing about Harriman is so many places where, you can basically be at a trailhead. And then within a half mile to a mile, you'll be on the top of a beautiful vista on a glacier scraped, mountainside that you can walk on for a mile or two, where you can see, 360-degree views in every single direction. There's just nothing in the world like Harriman.
Yeah.
I would run into people in Harriman, and we'd be talking about hiking. They say, well, have you been to Yosemite? I said, yeah. Have you been here? Have you been there? And I say, yeah. I said, but look where you are right now. What do we need to worry about all this other stuff? Where are you now? Like, my son lived in Colorado for a while, right by the Rocky Mountains, and even he would say when we would go on hikes in Harriman, he'd say, Dad, I just can't believe how beautiful this place is. There's just so much here.
Yeah, the diversity that Harriman offers, not just in the physical attributes, but you'll have people coming up during the summer through hiking the AT, starting in Georgia, going all the way to Maine. You'll have, nature place campers taking day hikes in the park. You'll have people fishing in the lakes or paddling, and you'll have people coming out of the city in the surrounding areas for like barbecues or going for a swim in Lake Welsh, and all of them come with different views of what Harriman is, and all have their own different appreciations.
And they were all going to be more wowed because part of what I started to work on was a new trail plan. I was one of the many, supervisors and main volunteers that was active in that. And there's going to be a lot of changes, particularly to the Reeves Meadow area, and it's all going to be for the benefit, for the advantage. And what I think the plan is going to do is it's going to preserve some of the key elements of Harriman, which is that there are, some people that come to Harriman and they just want to get to the lake. And so there'll be an easy trail to navigate to the quote unquote lake or to this vista or that. But then they're going to keep the more difficult trails. I mean, many of the trails that I regularly hiked in Harriman are more challenging, and more with more vertical, with more rocks, with more tree roots, with more this and that, than many of the trails that I hike here. It's just there's just such diversity there. It's amazing.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about how you got onto the hike and how you connected with Harriman. But let's talk a little bit on how you connected with the nature
day
place.
Camp.
Yeah.
The day, by the I say this, but meeting the Nature Place Day Camp and working for the day camp was one of the most rewarding things I've ever done in my life. And believe me, I think about flying down there just to lead hikes again, over the summer. But
always welcome. Always welcome.
Unfortunately, but it's an interesting story how I met the day camp. It was a rainy day, not terrible thunderstorms, but it was like rainy weather. And I was also, in the back of my mind was an article that I was writing for the Natural Awakenings magazine, which was on hiking with children. And so I'm walking, and I decided to do some trail review over by the Corman Center and the Big Hill Shelter. And so I had like a whole path planned where I was going to take the Suffering Bear Mountain Trail and the long path and just kind of explore what was going on there. Well, I was on the long path and I was about maybe, 100 yards or so from the shelter, and I hear, the laughter and the carrying on of kids. And I'm like, well, this is pretty interesting. I mean, here we are in the middle of the week, on a rainy day, and I hear like kids, and this has been like my thing had been to try to find kids on the trail to interview, and to just kind of find out why they connected with nature and what was going on, because that was my whole thing, was hiking with children, and I come around the shelter. And there inside is like about 15 kids with counselors. I didn't know that, and I'm like, oh, and so the counselor comes out to see me, like, to protective of the kids. And I explained what I was doing and who I was, and they told me about the camp. And so I'm thinking, wow, this is really pretty cool. This is a source of information about hiking with children. And the kids were really cool, but I interacted with them from afar, and some of the reading material and just seeing the way it was really pretty cool. They were actually mostly in the shelter because it was a light rain that was falling, which was particularly cool, and because that's what you don't always stay out in the rain. Anyway, in my mind, I'm like, okay, so now this day camp is a source of information about kids and hiking. So I'm going to interview the owners of the day camp, but it's also a potential source of advertising revenue, because I would think that maybe the day camp would want to advertise in my Natural Awakenings magazine. So I started the process of connecting with them, and they provided me with good editorial for my article. They weren't interested in advertising at that moment, but they said I should meet them in the beginning of the year, next year, and that maybe we'd put together a program. This was about 6 or 7 years ago. And so when I, was preparing to interview with Ed Beaver and Scott and Isla, I did what I always do, which is I looked at the website to learn more about the camp and everything that they offered. And I noticed that they had job offerings they were looking for day hike leaders. And I'm like, I'm looking at the job description, I'm saying, oh, wouldn't this be cool? And so when I went there and I met with them, I mentioned as a joke, I said, I'm here for this advertising opportunity and marketing, but I noticed that you're looking for day hike leaders. And so Scott looked at me and he smiled and he said, and his eyes just like lit up and he's like, yeah, you would be great at that. Because they knew a lot about me at that point. They knew that I was a supervisor at Harriman. They knew I knew everything about
Yeah.
Harriman.
Yeah.
They knew
Yeah.
that I loved nature. They knew that I was writing articles about nature. And I said, well, Scott, I can't possibly be a day hike leader. I don't know anything about leading hikes. He says, what do you mean? He says, do you like to hike? I said, yeah. He said, do you know the trails? I said, yeah. He said, do you like children? I said, of course, I love children. He said, well, let me tell you, you can do it, and we'll just give you a little bit of training. You'll do your wilderness first aid and everything. And so that was like made in heaven. So
And the
like
rest is history.
that's how I got involved in it. And the first year that I was there, they drew upon my knowledge of the trails and the loop trails and the trail system to expand they had a whole repertoire of about 10 or 12 different hikes that were done on a regular basis. And we expanded it to about 15 or 20 or 15 hikes. In the first year, I wasn't as helpful or as involved in that process. But over the years, it became my mission to help the camp find more and more varied hikes. And the last few years I was there with Jason coming on board and everything like that, and also with Scott, it became they really developed a mantra that they didn't want to have kids doing the same hikes over and over again. So we had to add more.
Variety.
We had to keep adding more hikes and adding more areas. So we included the Sterling Forest area. We included the Palisades, and we included the Ramapo Reservation. So with my expertise and with their drive and desire, we came to a group of about, I don't remember, 26 or 30 different hikes. And every year, based on this collection of hikes, we could make sure that, or the camp could make sure that the kids wouldn't have to do the same hike again if possible. And so, like, in addition to having the great hikes that was particularly suited to the expertise of the the ability of the kids based on their age, they didn't even have to repeat the hikes.
Yeah, I mean, we now have a Rolodex of over 50 different hikes, and the incredible piece is that they're all like kind of graded towards different age groups. So when you come to the nature place as a young person, you're doing, relatively easy hikes. They're developmentally, challenging for where they are in life, but they're relatively easy and relatively flat and short. And as you get older, you're doing different hikes. And when you get to, the oldest age group, you're doing some pretty awesome and challenging hikes and having lunch with places with incredible views and things along those lines. And yeah, we've designed it to be a way where you never have to, you're never going to repeat a hike. Maybe you'll recognize a couple of intersections just because of how interconnected Harriman is, but it's pretty incredible. Roger, so for you, what's the best part about hiking with Nature Place campers?
Well, it's interesting. When I started with the camp, for me, the hike was about making miles and checking off things and figuring out ways to hike sometimes faster, and it was about the hike. Even though I love nature and I realized that I was out in the woods, I was very obsessed with hiking itself. But very quickly, I learned through my experience with Alex, who had been a hiker, a day hike leader before me, who's also a teacher of science, or I think biology or something like that, and he knows a lot about plants, is that, and then from the kids itself, like the great thing about the kids at Nature Place Day Camp, many of them have been there for many, many years, and many of them came from families that were interested in hiking. And a lot of these kids knew more than I did about nature. And it was just amazing to learn from the children. But the other amazing thing was to see the nature through the eyes of the kids. So what happened is I transformed really from being a hiker to being almost a naturalist, because I started to just get so involved and so interested in what I was seeing, and the for me it was about terrain, but then it became about the plants and the animals and all this other and the insects. We have some kids that are insect specialists, um, so that's really what happened is and now, rather than trying to hike 2.5 miles an hour or 3 miles an hour, my hiking speed is down a bit, and I'm basically just I hike sometimes. Sometimes I make time, but a lot of times I'm just happy to be out in the nature. And another thing that we did at the nature place is this thing called still hunting.
Everybody loves still hunting. Yeah, please go ahead.
So still hunting is something that I learned, and it's when you basically get the kids to go to a special spot on the hike and just sit still. And for the youngest kids, it's maybe 2 or 3 minutes. For the older kids, it can go for 4 or 5 or 6 minutes, and it's like a meditation. It's like a Zen thing where you just kind of get in touch with nature, and you listen to what's happening, and you smell what's happening, and you feel what's happening, and you report back to the group what you learned and what you saw and what you felt, and it's just such a sharing experience. And in these days of devices and screens and all this other stuff, it's amazing how well the kids take to nature, and how they can just not even crave any of their stuff. It was just fantastic. So that all rubbed off on me, and so now, I'm Mr. Natural. I'm not just a hiker.
Awesome. For those that are listening to this episode who are not experienced hikers, individuals or families, what are just a couple of pieces of advice you would offer to someone that wants to get into hiking, into exploring the trails of Harriman, possibly, but it seems a little bit intimidating at first?
Well, I mean, I think that there's so much information online, so you should definitely do some Google hiking and hiking with children and things like that, and read up about it. But the important thing is to know where you're going, and to fit it to your ability level. So when you're starting out, you'll start in a more popular place with trails that are better marked. Equally important is the gear, and being prepared for the hike. You want to make sure you have the right shoes. I mean, for mild hikes, you could do, sneakers, but you want to make sure they have treads on them. But mostly you want, like if you're really serious about getting into hiking, you need to get the right hiking shoes. You need to get, you need to carry with you, what you need for supplies. You need to have plenty of water. You need to be mindful of areas where there might be ticks. And so you need to take precautions against that with insect spray and with your clothing, tucking your clothing in. You need to understand the principles of leave no trace, and leaving the area the way you found it. So it's I always say be prepared. There's one of the things that Jason and I joked about when we were doing a family hike in the rain, and everybody canceled except for us. So we decided to do the hike anyway. Is that there's really no such thing as bad weather. There's just bad gear. And so if you're prepared, I would rather have more than I need than be in the woods and not have something that I really need. So I always carry a backpack with me. I always have water. I always have a first aid kit, a much smaller kit if it's just me. I always have like a cutting tool, tool to cut, a foldable saw, and all the different extra clothing in case you get wet. And you should wear the right clothing too. I mean, the first time that I went out to learn about being a trail supervisor, I went with this guy that was an expert who hiked all his life, who was a sawyer and who was a trail supervisor, and I was wearing jeans.
Yeah, jeans are a no-no when you go hiking.
And he said, I'm hesitant to even take you out in the woods. I said, what's the matter? He says, you're wearing jeans. I'm like, yeah, well, that's what you wear when you go out in the woods, right? He says, no, you got to wear the right, you got to wear pants that if you get wet, they're going to dry quickly, and and have certain types of properties to them.
Yeah, just for the listener, We highly recommend you don't wear cotton when you go hiking, and this is year round. So when cotton gets wet, and cotton will get wet if you go hiking because either the weather or your body's sweating or things along those lines. When cotton is wet, it could actually rob your body of heat. And even during a heat wave in the summer, if you're wearing a really wet cotton shirt while you're hiking, you could be like borderline hypothermic if you're in the shade or something along those lines. So wearing fibers, either natural or non-natural fibers that help wick moisture away, like a natural fiber would be wool. Everybody loves those smart wool socks. They're really comfortable, but they also help wick moisture away from your body and keep you warm and dry. Or things like polypropylene is another thing. So yeah, cotton, especially heavy cotton like jeans, we don't recommend that.
Well, it's interesting that, Jason's asking me questions, but he is an outdoorsman, and he has so much expertise that just far exceeds anything that I've ever experienced. So, it's like the camp is lucky to have a guy like him at the command, so to speak. The steward.
Thanks, Roger. And I remember that hike that we took, and it was awesome. That was like one of the best. That was one of the best days. It was a March hike, so none of the leaves had come in on the trees yet, and it was raining and a little misty, and you got to go out in those conditions because if you just go out when it's beautiful every day, you'll lose some of that appreciation. But I remember hiking through the hill in this gorgeous patch of mountain laurel, which was so brightly green because mountain laurel stays green year round. And there was like fog over our heads and it was raining and it was like such a special moment.
The glowing lichen, remember the lichen?
Oh, yeah.
was like that particular part of the trail. And in the springtime, in the summer, the early summer, that trail is covered with blueberries. And the kids love to pick the blueberries, and then what's interesting also about that particular segment, I don't know if I mentioned it to you at the time, but that was the very first time I went on a hike with the counselors in my very first year. We did part of that segment. Yeah. So it's like you said, you're visiting the same places in different ways, and it's just so rewarding.
Yeah, Roger and I have shared many a mile through Harriman trails, and I value all of that time greatly. Roger, in the short time that we have left, I'm gonna hit you with some rapid fire questions, and they're meant to come off the top of your head, so don't think too much about them. But so for you, what's your favorite trail to hike in Harriman?
The West Mountain, and in the West Mountain is a beautiful area, and from the West Mountain you can see Bear Mountain, and you can see Perkins Tower, and you can see the Hudson River. And that's one of our very popular hike destinations for the camp because you can reach it from the Anthony Wayne parking area. So there's never a parking problem.
Yeah. Do you have a hike that you think is the most challenging hike you've done in Harriman, whether because of the length or the vertical gain or some other aspect that makes it challenging?
Well, there's the steepest hike is Pinjip Mountain, which is the Suffering Bear Mountain Trail. And it's not that easy to construct a loop there. So you're talking about, usually like, unless you're doing it out and back, you're talking about putting together like a 7-mile loop. But again, you with all the information that's available, there's All Trails, there's an app, there's a Venza, and then there's the Trail Conference. If you really want to find a hike, you can just go to the, New York, New Jersey Trail Conference.org. And there's a button when you get to the, find hikes. And then there's like a little way to monitor, like, you can put in level of difficulty, moderate, strenuous. You can put in length of hike, 5 miles, 10 miles. You can basically create a hike and you can see exactly what it is and it can be geared to your ability. So there's just so many ways to find hikes now.
What's your favorite piece of gear that you take hiking with?
The poles are really are something. I like the Diamond Z carbon poles because they fold up into 3 pieces and then they're very light. They're light as and then they go into your backpack. So you can use them when you need them and you can easily put them away and have your hands free. So that would be one of them. And I feel that you should always have a knife with you. I love knives, and I carry Columbia River Knife Company or Spider. You want to make sure you have the right tools. So my favorite tools are either like the perfect hiking knife or the perfect poles.
Yeah, the poles are great. Not only do they help with balance, but they also help with fatigue because they take pressure off your knees. So if
I
you're
mean, the other
doing,
thing is the backpack itself. I mean, I don't get paid to say this, but the Osprey packs are amazing. And another thing that I absolutely love is having the water reservoir in the pack, particularly in the summer, because I fill that container with ice cubes and water, so my water stays chilled for the whole time. And you never have to stop to take a bottle of water out of your pack. You never have to worry about leaving your water behind when you stop at a snack spot. It's just that I think is probably one of the most satisfying and important pieces of gear, now that you mention it, is like just being able to put that little nozzle in your mouth and not having to scramble for water is just, I love that.
personally, I'm a low alpine backpack person. I still hike with the same backpack I got when I was 16, and it's like a valued, treasured piece of my existence these days. Okay. And the final question for you, Roger, what is your favorite trail snack or lunch to have while out hiking?
My wife is amazing. She usually cuts me up an apple, and I basically will put it in a pint container, and I put it in my knapsack so that it's near the chilled water that I keep with me. And so, like, when I can be on the top of a mountain and pull out, and it doesn't have to be apple. Sometimes it's pineapple, sometimes it's some other fruit. But to pull out a container of fruit and just eat that fresh fruit, sitting on a mountaintop, to me, that's like my favorite snack.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Roger, I want to thank you for coming on the podcast with us and telling us all about your background and Harriman and hiking. I can say that we miss you at the Nature Place, and you're always welcome to come back.
No, not as much as I miss you guys. It breaks my heart. That was one of the toughest things about leaving, the New York metropolitan area was leaving the Nature Place Day Camp. It probably was one of the single most things that made the biggest difference in my life, particularly at the stage of life that I was in. And I'll never forget it. And I would always recommend it to anybody.
Yeah, well, that's amazing to say. And you're always welcome back, even for a guest star appearance on a hike, maybe one day this coming summer. But thanks so much for your time, Roger. And we'll see you down the trail.
Take care, brother. As I say, happy trails.
Happy trails, Roger. Thanks for listening. For more information on the Nature Place, our summer camp, year-round programs, or guided family hikes, check out thenatureplace.com. We hope you enjoyed our podcast and tune in for future episodes. Until then, please be kind to your fellow human and go outside and explore the wonders of nature. This has been a Hey N audio production.